Welcome to St. Louis on the Air. Anyone called a political analyst has to be flying high right now. The primary season's over, setting the stage for the final countdown to this November's election. Along with it comes the name-calling, the accusations, and innuendo that have come to characterize politics in America in and out of the political season. Polls show disenchanted Democrats, a fractious GOP, and an insurgent Tea Party movement that's been flexing its muscle now for months and did so again yesterday. Hello, I'm Don Marsh. We had planned to have Ken Rudin of NPR, the political editor of NPR, with us today. However, Ken has taken suddenly ill and is unable to appear on this program. We hope someday soon to have him back once again, but he's not feeling well. So David Robertson of the University of Missouri Political Science Department has very kindly and quickly stepped in to fill the breach, as it were. Dave, we're happy to have you for many reasons. It's always good to see you, but especially good that you appeared when Ken took so suddenly ill.
Well, I can't match Ken Rudin, but I can fill in a little bit. So,
well, it comes at a good time because everybody in the world of politics and political analysis is taking a look at what happened yesterday. The primary season is over. I think there's a runoff in Louisiana, which is not something that's going to affect anything very much, except in Louisiana. But basically, the primary season's over. What's your take on what happened yesterday? A general overview, if you would.
When someone called me to mention that Delaware had gone to the Tea Party candidate, I said, wow. Then that's my reaction. Wow. The Tea Party has shown strength beyond places that are normally conservative and have a strong conservative Republican base, like Utah, like Alaska. And they've moved into a state that is routinely Democratic recently and been able to secure a nominee that's consistent with their point of view. And I think that's a big shock, both to the Republican Party, maybe more to the Republican Party than to the Democrats.
Yeah, I think we have to emphasize, now some people might be confused because of all the attention that Christine O'Donnell's nomination has been gotten and gleaned from the media. It still is only a primary victory, and she does have to face a Democrat who has some formidable credentials and poll numbers at this point.
That's right. There is a Democrat named Coons who is the county executive, I believe, of Newcastle County, one of the biggest counties in the state, maybe the biggest county.
Of the three counties in the state.
Yeah,
it's a pretty small state.
And very well known, which is pretty easy to do in the state of Delaware. And she's going to have an uphill fight. Remember, she's already run in that state. She was defeated. And I think one of the problems with winning such a bitter primary as this is that your opponent in the general election has been given a script by your opponent in the primary election on which to base a campaign against you. Yeah. So that's going to be tough.
And we should point out, for those who may not know, that the Senate seat that will be decided in November is Joe Biden's Senate seat, one he held for more than 30 years. So
that's right.
That is testimony to the democratic nature of
that's right. Right.
Let's get back, though, to the Republican reaction to this, because she was not supported by, quote, the Republican establishment. She's very different. She's done some, in her personal life, she's had some issues, and she's come out on with some things during the course of the campaign that have really turned heads. So the Republican establishment is just backing off.
Right. Well, Republicans thought that they had it made with Mike Castle, who, as you know, Delaware has only one representative because it's so small. So he was elected by the same constituency that elects senators. So Castle, who has been very, very popular for many years in the state of Delaware, both as governor and U.S. representative, was thought to have the inside track and leading in the polls for election to the Senate this fall. However, now insiders in the Republican Party are sort of beside themselves because they're seeing a difficulty in keeping a grip on control of nominations of people who are most likely to win general elections in places like Delaware.
And there was some thought that if, in fact, Castle could win, they had a good chance of picking up that seat, perhaps, and would add to Republican numbers on Capitol Hill.
That's right.
Do we make too much of the fact that she had the Tea Party endorsement? How important is that in terms of what's happened?
Well, the Tea Party itself is not as organized as a strong group might be, an interest group, but
It has no leader per se.
that's right. But it has a lot of energy and a lot of people who are willing to fight hard for it for a number of reasons, and it seems to have helped create a surge in people participating in what, frankly, are pretty low turnout affairs like primaries and conventions and caucuses. That's what happened to an incumbent in Utah, Bob Bennett, who was upset by the Tea Party. But it was in local conventions that required people to really, really be committed and show up in fairly small numbers to make that change. This is different in Delaware because it's a primary election. I haven't had a chance to see how many people turned out to vote.
Oh, it was well over 40,000, about 10,000 more than was expected.
Yeah, so there was a big surge of people toward the Tea Party candidate, O'Donnell, and away from Castle. And I think Republicans have very mixed feelings. The Republican establishment has very mixed feelings because they can see that there's tremendous excitement in the Tea Party, and you can see their reaction across the country. For example, John McCain, very worried in the state of Arizona that a more conservative candidate might upset him in a primary, and he adjusted and tacked pretty far to the right on a number of issues he had staked out as independent issues and moderate issues previously. The entire Republican establishment has sat up and taken notice of the energy on the one hand, but the consequences for candidates who may or may not be well placed for the voters in that state. Clearly, the Tea Party candidate in Alaska, Miller, running for the Senate, who upset another incumbent senator, is well placed to win that election. But that's far from clear in Delaware. Delaware looks now like it's going to be leaning Democratic for sure going into the Senate election in November.
The Tea Party is claiming another scalp in New York State.
Right.
In New Hampshire, where the Tea Party could be a factor, it's still uncertain. As we speak here,
Right.
that is still undetermined. But
Right.
but New York, it's a gubernatorial race in this
Right.
instance.
And again, a candidate who was seen as quite conservative when he ran in the past, Rick Lazio, was upset by a Tea Party candidate for the gubernatorial nomination on the Republican side. Another side story of all this is what some of the candidates who were upset are going to do about it. In New York, there's a conservative line that somebody could run on. There are independent candidacies you could run. So it may be that there will be 2 or 3 Republicans in some of these races on the ballot running against one Democrat in New York State. It's the person who's seen as a prohibitive favorite, Andrew Cuomo, who would be the Democratic nominee. And this is not going to help Republicans gain ground on Cuomo if there's that kind of dissent in the party.
And that's a major point, because the irony in all of this is I think many people associate Tea Party and Tea Party membership with the Republican Party, at least on
Right.
the right side of the political spectrum. And yet it has the potential to do all this damage to the party.
Well, yeah, and I've seen in talking to a couple of Republican leaders a little bit of ambivalence because they understand that the key is to win elections. And in conservative constituencies, it won't matter much, like Utah, like Alaska, but in a constituency like Delaware or a place like New York, it's not going to be so helpful to have a Tea Party candidate because they're going to be characterized by their opponent, whether they like it or not, as out of the mainstream. And they're going to allow their Democratic opponents to tack a little bit to the right and to present themselves as more moderate candidates who can attract voters in the suburbs.